And we are live. Welcome everybody to Lubbock Compact Live for Wednesday, May, 26th. We are almost in June. Um, Kind of a hot day out there today. I am here with my co-host, Dr. Nick Bergfeld. We are also joined by Mr. Josh Shankles, who is our Garden City coordinator. We also have a special guest with us today, Jessica Tullar Caroom. This should be a good show. Going to talk about some good nature, parks, some good stuff. So before we do that, of course, we got to kick it off with this week's headlines. So Dr. Nick, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, to begin with, a quick PSA for everybody. So the moment is upon us. ERCOT transition for Lubbock's power supply is happening this weekend over Memorial Day. So expect something around the order of about 30 minutes worth of power outages. Some of the city is going to experience that. If there are things that you need to make sure the power doesn't go out on, or you need to be able to strategize or plan around that, go to LPNL's website. You can put in your address and they will tell you when they expect your area to experience the power outage if you're going to experience one. So please be aware of that. That transition has happened. Make sure that you plan in advance and get everything in order for that switch. So news of this past week. First, a quick update on the Citizens Tower flood episode. If you recall, in mid-March of this year, one of our larger rainstorms resulted in flooding components of the Citizens Tower complex. I believe, if I remember correctly, about 2 feet of water ultimately accumulated in some of those areas. And at the time, there was a lot of uncertainty about the long-term impacts and implications of that flood. In the short term, it shut down all the elevators in Citizens Tower, made them not function. It took some time to get everything back online. The LP&L utility customer service area was completely, essentially, has to be redone and reconstructed and fixed. So folks are still having to do their utility transactions, or if they have to engage with customer service, essentially in the lobby area of Citizens Tower. And so then, in this most recent city council meeting on Tuesday, the city council had to now allocate $2.8 million from the general fund for additional maintenance and renovation to try to get all those pieces fixed. And the challenge here is we don't necessarily know how much the ultimate cost is going to be. The city's hopes in the beginning was that this would be covered by insurance, but it seems like that might not necessarily be the case now. And so we continue to essentially pay out on this project. And for those who don't know the history of this project, this began in the mid-2000s. The renovation of the Omni building is what it was called before that. And this has cost Lubbock taxpayers over $45 million at this point in time. And it's a good example of that $45 million, us as citizens, we never voted on. So the move to Citizens Tower, all the things that have happened with that, we actually never had input as a community on whether or not that was something that we wanted to have happen. So Adam, any thoughts on Citizens Tower flood and Citizens Tower building itself, just how we ended up there before we go to the next topic?
Yeah, Citizens Tower happened when I wasn't paying attention, so I don't have much on that. Yeah, 2.8 million is pretty high, and yeah, there's no way to really know what that's going to cost, because I mean, if you're just doing a regular remodel in a house, when you start opening up walls and things, like, you just start discovering more and more stuff. And with 2 feet of water, I mean, everybody saw the video, so I mean, that was a lot of destruction going on. So yeah, I just one of those things. I don't know what quite to make of that.
Yeah, and it's nobody does at this point, and even with the city side, figuring out whether or not insurance will cover it. One of the challenges is determining who exactly is liable for the flood. And so the current thinking right now is that it was a hole that opened up from the area around the parking garage that's currently being constructed. And that was essentially how that water flooded in. So some questions there. It's an unfortunate example of just this project that just simply seems to keep on costing the taxpayer a significant amount of financing, but also just hasn't really had a lot of the promise that we hoped that potentially this building could have done. So Next topic is Charter Review Committee updates. So this week, the Charter Review Committee met for their final time in public. They'll have one more meeting to finalize the minutes of this last meeting, but for all intents and purposes, they are done with their work. This committee meeting was really what people call a vote-a-rama, in that they had essentially all that they did was vote on the recommendations that they had already previously made. They did allow for citizen comment. And so, Adam, you were able to show up and give public comment. A couple other folks were able to show up. Difficult because it was in the middle of the day, challenging for people to go. But there was the opportunity for that. And Adam, how did you feel about this committee meeting and the outcome from it?
Yeah, so if anybody caught my public comment, they probably would understand my stance on this whole committee process. If you didn't, basically, my feelings on this is that it's kind of just more of the same that we've seen time and again since I've started doing this. I've only been doing this a year, but I've been to quite a few city council meetings, committee meetings. I don't even keep count anymore. So I've seen this process happen over and over again. And the gist of what I was trying to convey to them is that this is exactly why people get frustrated and don't have any faith in civic engagement and taking getting involved in these political processes, because it's frustrating, it's draining. And I told them that it's a feat of courage for most people to even get up there to speak. The place is made to look intimidating, right? You're on cameras. Most people are not used to being on cameras. I've in my life I've been on cameras. A lot of those folks, they've been interviewed in some capacity or another. Most people are not used to that, right? On top of that, you've got an audience behind you of all these strangers, and then you've got the committee there looking at you, right? So I just felt like they disrespected all of those people who spent those almost 4 hours over those two public hearings of comments. And that's what I told the chair, that he disrespected them by calling their input non-substantive, because I guess he was bored that all of these people were voicing their support for a livable wage. And so, yeah, that's basically my thoughts. Josh, you want to chime in on this? You were really involved in this process as well.
Good to have you on this, as we come to the tail end of this committee. Josh, you've been super involved in this process.
Well, I didn't get to catch this last meeting. I sent in a statement, but I didn't get to watch it in person. And so I would thank everybody who was able to close out this process and be there in person. I'll just mirror and reflect what you guys have said already. It's disappointing to be invited to come give the input, right? And then that, it's like pulling a rug out from under that. And so, yeah, I would totally mirror what you guys said, that this is what makes it very frustrating, and it is insulting because even in the same said course of the meetings, one of the complaints the members brought up was that people weren't engaged enough in volunteerism and in activism, and it's just so bogus and backwards. And what is also disappointing is that this was the representation our council saw fit to appoint to this thing, with all due respect to these folks that think they were doing a good job of it. There are plenty of recommendations that came out of the committee that are probably just fine, but the most key and transformative ones, and the ones that people spoke almost unanimously to leave one of them, totally unaddressed and have no logical argument for your assertions is problematic.
Yeah, and for me, that's what I come back to, where this talking point of it's a service, when you actually ask somebody, and that's where I wish sometimes we could have dialogue with these folks and just simply ask them, what does that mean to you? Like when you use that term, what exactly is coming up in your mind that is then informing you that being on the city council is a special kind of service that demands time and attention, but no pay. What are other things that fit into that category of service in your mind? Like what exactly is it that justifies? And and then when you peel back that layer, all of a sudden you kind of think about, is there anything behind this talking point? Is this just simply a way to ensure that exclusion in this process continues, and they can just simply say that and move on? And it's just one of those experiences that we see with a lot of these committees where the citizen input is asked for. We show up, right? Lots of individuals, lots of activism, lots of energy, citizens, everyday citizens from across our city attend these meetings. And then to have the committee essentially say that, well, it's all well and good that we've heard all these things in public, but in my private life, I've heard many people say other different things than what you said. And so I'm going to go with that instead. And it's sort of like, well, then what are public hearings for? What exactly are these committees for? If you can always just essentially say, where did your recommendations come from? Did you get input from the citizens? How is it that you can always just casually or conveniently say, well, I talked to my buddies at home and a good number of them told me I should feel this way. And so whatever was told to me by the citizens who showed up to the formal public hearing process that we made very difficult for them to attend, that those voices are invalidated by all the people that I've heard from outside of this. And it's like, well, so their comments are not on the public record. I'll never be able to know who exactly were those people. When you say many people, I'll never know how many that actually was.
Yeah.
Like there's no accountability essentially.
Yeah.
And this committee just was a great example of the fact that that's how things operate here, right? That is how the committee structures currently are operating.
Yeah, and just for everybody listening, so the thing that we had the problem with, so overall, there were some changes made that we advocated for, particularly with the petition process, and that's great. But when you're talking about the weight of an issue, the petition process versus the city council pay are two completely different weights of an issue. And that was shown when, again, all of those people showed up and created almost 4 hours of public comments saying that they were in support, many of you who are listening, that were in support of a livable wage. We gave them some specific numbers because they asked for specific numbers. Though we gave them numbers in the first place, we came back with even more specific numbers. City staff came back with even more specific numbers. And literally every way you sliced it, it came back to the thing that made the most sense was a livable wage. And so what they ended up at, I'll spare you all the back and forth because it was pretty cringe worthy throughout the whole thing. But what they came to was $800. Okay, so let's start at the beginning. Currently, city council members make $25 a month. The mayor makes $75 a month. So it went from there to the recommendation that was passed is $800 per month for city council, which is $9,600 a year. Or the other one was $1,300 a month for the mayor, which works out to $15,600 per year. So in real life, this is just a kind of a rhetorical question for you to ponder on out there. If somebody told you were going to do a full-time job and they told you they were going to pay you $25 a month or $800 a month, would either of those numbers matter to you in the real world? It goes back to Josh had mentioned this during this discussion, which is a very good point. When you have a company with a market cap of 800 million plus, right? Meaning the company as a whole is worth 800 million plus. The people that are in charge, like the CEOs right? The CEOs, CFOs, these folks are in charge of looking over all of that. And they have what's called a fiduciary duty, meaning they have to do what's right for the company with that money. And the same thing, it's the same exact thing for a city. And Lubbock is 800 plus million annual budget that these people oversee and make decisions about that have very real life consequences on real human beings' lives. And we're saying that we should not pay those people properly. And there's no company on the face of this earth that would be worth 800 plus million a year that would be thinking that way. Quite the opposite. They pay these figures, they pay these types of people $300,000, $400,000 a year. So it's just really it's really unfortunate. But we have an opportunity when it goes to council. I am going to be trying to meet with some council members, as many as I can, in the very short amount of time that we have until June 8th, and try to, get some support from them, because this is the committee level. So it's now past the committee level. It goes up to the city council level, and we'll see how they respond. We will let everybody know once we know those dates and times for the public comments. But I would just tell everybody prepare for June 8th, because I'm pretty sure when they're going to take the comments. So.
Yeah, and for our final quick topic, and this is really just to get you thinking about it and to think about and to dream about how dollars from the American Rescue Act could be used in our community for the betterment of all of us. So you've likely heard now that the American Rescue Act had dollars that were set aside for county or sort of local governments, so both city level government and county level governments. And so the city of Lubbock is going to get a little bit under $60 million in money from this program. Now, that is a very, very large sum of money. And for a city like Lubbock, the thing is, we're going to be able to use a lot of that for figuring out economic development and trying to help people, kind of bringing them out of the COVID crisis. In a lot of communities, the majority of these dollars are going to be used to plug holes in their budget. In the state of Texas, that's not going to be the case. And the reason for that is because we get the city budget, they get their money mostly, almost 50-50, from sales tax and property taxes. Property taxes during COVID time didn't change, right? Appraisal values, things like that. So that money was going to come in no matter what. The big question that many people were concerned about was consumption. So sales tax revenue, people assumed that would go down during COVID time because we'd all be stuck at homes. Now, what ended up actually happening was just spending patterns changed, but the amount of spending actually stayed about the same. So at the Tuesday City Council meeting, the council heard an update on essentially how much sales tax revenue they're going to get this year, and it's quite good. And so Lubbock as a whole, we do not have a budget hole that we need to fix with these American Rescue Plan dollars that many other places across the country do, because they rely on income taxes as a component of their financing. And that was the piece that really fluctuated a lot more than the other two. So we are in a position now as a city where there is a windfall amount of money that's coming to us. And there is no citizen oversight or accountability, at least currently in place, to deal with that. I think about the times when the city council has a large sum of money and they don't need the citizens to vote on it. So I feel like talking about the 45 million citizen tower project today is a great sort of example there. The Gateway Fund is another great example of large sum of money, no accountability. And, to wrap up this kind of component, Adam and Josh would want to get your thoughts. How do you feel about the city of Lubbock determining how to use these dollars without citizen input? And does it make sense to have a process?
Yeah, I don't trust it. And I'm going to tell you why. Because again, I've been dealing with these folks for, about a year, pretty much constantly. And we're cordial. I don't mean any disrespect to any of them, but I'm just being frank. from what I've seen. I don't trust this group of people with that kind of money with no oversight. And that's not to say that it's all of them, and I'll leave that up to everybody's own opinion. So, but I do know that it's not all of them, but the majority of the folks on this council sitting, I don't trust them with that amount of money with no oversight, because we've seen what they've done with oversight blatantly, right? We've seen what happened with the Gateway Fund. The same mind frame, if you will, that was at play when the Gateway Fund thing happened, is still in play. It's still the same thing. This is one thing that I've been kind of shocked by, honestly, by some of these people who have this similar mind frame that we've seen for so long. They it's almost as if they think that they're the first people thinking this way and doing these things this way, but we've been complaining about this stuff. We've been advocating against this stuff. So it's nothing new. But yeah, I don't trust it at all. I think I don't know what the opportunity here is to advocate, but I would be up for advocating for some sort of blue ribbon committee. I know you've mentioned that, but Josh, what do you think?
Well, you know, yeah, that's all right on. I really hope that in addition to getting some citizen oversight and input into this, by establishing some kind of committee or oversight board to sort of set some things in motion, I really hope that it would get spent on, fixing problems and known needs, and not do something like use it to retire debt or use it to, route it to already established businesses and entities that already have lines of credit and these kinds of things, as we've seen happen with funds like this before. So yeah, I think it would be smart to get eyes on it. And also I'd like to see it go to, physical stuff and investment.
Yeah, and that's it for the news. Wanted to raise the profile of that, and if you're listening, definitely think about, what does it make sense? What are the things that we should use that kind of windfall financing for? Because as a community, we really should have a dialogue about this and what makes sense to use for these dollars. So, all right, Adam, back to you.
Yeah, well, before we bring Miss Jessica on, if you're enjoying listening to the show and you want to support the Compact in our work, please consider donating at lubbockcompact.com/donate. Of course, each and every dollar you gives us goes into producing the show and doing our advocacy work in the community. Also, if you would like to volunteer, we have volunteer opportunities available. And so you can go to lubbockcompact.com/volunteer. We are planting vegetables in community gardens. We need folks for public engagement at city council meetings, city committee meetings. We are advocating for neighborhoods in various ways. And we also need somebody to help producing the show. So if you know somebody who has video or audio or both experience, we are looking for somebody to do some things for the show. So again, you can go to lubbockcompact.com/volunteer and join us in the mission to empower communities. That's what we are. We are a community empowerment organization. And so I will go ahead and introduce our guest. So joining us today is Jessica Tullar Caroom. Jessica has used her public health knowledge for the past 5 years, supporting school and community gardens with the South Plains Hunger Solutions Coalition. Jessica started Growing Together Texas last spring to address the needs she saw in her work with the Coalition for a nonprofit to support gardeners, growers, and cooks. So Jessica, welcome to the show. And Josh, I will let you handle her interview.
Hey,
Hello.
Jessica. We've really been looking forward to this conversation. Let me just start by expressing my admiration for all the things that you do, and thank you for being here.
Of course. It's funny. I mean, you express admiration. I feel like we're just getting started. So fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. Thank you.
Awesome. And just really quick, Josh, just a reminder for everybody, if you have questions, because they're about to get into some really good stuff, if you have questions, you can put them in the Q&A in the Zoom, you can speak them in the Zoom, or as always, you can put your questions in the Facebook comments and we will get those answered for you. So Josh, take it away.
So we know each other well. We've been friends for a minute now, but for our audience, why don't you give us a little bit of your background, some of the lay of the land, talk to us about your not-for-profit Growing Together Texas.
Well, so several years ago, if I recall, I think it was like fall of 2017, could have been 2016. But anyway, I started a school garden at Christ the King, where my kids were at school. And big dreams, lots of things. From public health, I had been in faculty position. I'd been doing a lot of epidemiological research, a lot of population research. I spent a lot of time writing papers, and I had just gotten to this place where I would spend months and months editing specific statistical analyses, and maybe 10 people would read it. And yes, I would go to conferences and we would try and like get messages out. And it's really important. Research is really important. You got to build up that research in order to move the field forward, but something was missing. And so starting this community or school garden for me was a way to finally be just really more in touch with, I mean, taking kids out to the garden and pulling carrots. It's Christmas. It's every time. They love pulling carrots. They don't care. They love pulling radishes. They don't eat radishes, but they're so happy to do that. Or beets. Anything, honestly, root vegetables is a huge win. But the days I don't have roots vegetables, I try and like please them with, leaves and so forth. But anyway, I had so much fun doing that. After about a year, I was like, what do other people do? Because I had just moved here and I was trucking along best I could, but I hadn't lived here more than a couple of years and thought, surely there's other more knowledgeable people out there. So I reached out to the AgriLife agent at the time, and he got me in touch with, shout out, AgriLife is super awesome, with somebody from what is now the Baylor Collaborative on Hunger and Poverty. And they were starting up. So that is out of Baylor, but the idea is they start up coalitions all over the state. And they actually have even been working on hunger and so forth issues like nationwide. But for us, they were trying to support school and community gardens as one of their efforts in addressing hunger. They also have action teams. We have an action team for the coalition on child hunger, and also Double Up Food Bucks. And that was a program that the Baylor group brought here. So I named a bunch of organizations. That's kind of the nature of a coalition, is it brings together a bunch of organizations, and we want to make sure that we aren't duplicating efforts. Everyone wants to make sure we aren't, having the same 10 people get help. We want to make sure we're spreading that out. And then also we want to make sure we're addressing gaps. What are we missing? So that's like the basic functions of the coalition. And basically after expressing interest in supporting school and community gardens, they asked me to be in charge of that action team. I also always kind of caution people when they show interest, because then sometimes you get put in charge of it. That's a danger. I'm sure that happens in the compact group as well. So, and with that work, that leads me to like why the nonprofit. So we actually applied and got funding from for the coalition, applied and got funding for row covers originally. So that's one of the things I've learned in Lubbock. In order to grow in the middle of the winter, it really helps if you have some protection for your plants. And the conversation among our group of school and community gardens said, school is open in these months when the weather conditions do not lend themselves to be able to be growing food. And so by the time you have a growing season, school's out and the kids aren't there. And So when we have these row covers, we can protect our plants and we can grow things throughout the school year. We don't have to just be doing it in the summer. And so we applied for funding for the Lubbock Mayor's Fitness Council, which is funding off of the Mayor's Marathon. And we got $1,000 and we spread that out over 7 or 8 different gardens, and had a training and had pickup supplies, all the things. And so that was our first time. But what I learned from that is that coalition is not an organization itself. That's a problem. So, because if you're a grantor, you're giving away money, you want to make sure you're giving it to a nonprofit. And so in that case, the Lubbock Mayor's Fitness Council worked with us, which was great. And they basically let Baylor handle our money. And so Baylor was our, you might say, our checkbook, right? And so we got all of our stuff. And then the next year we did the same thing and we got funding for kids' farmers markets. And that was really awesome. So we have $900 in funding that we actually still spending. I'll talk about that more in a little bit. But, and again, they let Baylor be our checkbook, which is great. But that's where I figured out like, oh, there isn't a nonprofit here that does school or community gardens. There isn't a nonprofit that supports growers. And so that's where I got to this: gardeners, growers, and cooks. And if you're wondering about cooks, the first question, Josh, as a farmer, can tell you that you get asked, the most common question, I should say, you get asked at the farmer's market when you're there is, as a farmer, what do I do with this? How do I eat this? How do I cook this? How do you like to eat this? Okay. And nobody's gonna, you have to create demand for said product, this economics. So if you can explain and excite and entice someone to eat a vegetable, for me, then you're going to have more vegetables bought. So that's, so public health person, I want people to eat more vegetables, but I got to get there, like by enticing them. So that's where the cooks part comes. So anyway, that's like public health all the way to creating a nonprofit and why. So yeah, that's where we started.
No, I think that's so interesting, just to pull back the curtain a little bit and also give you some credit, there's so much about working with you since we've known each other here that I have taken into the compact organization, because there are so many things in working with, diverse coalitions and trying to like mind the gaps in what's not getting seen and having oversight, and how, you kind of like start by conserving and preserving and saving what you already have, and then you kind of grow out organically from there. And those are lessons that we learn out of the garden about utility and economy and, following what works and doing that more. And so I not to get so woo-woo about it, but, we think everybody could get their hands in the dirt a little bit more, because there's so many lessons that we like take into these other things. And, a lot of things that I've learned from you, we've like taken into our organizational structure and how we approach, problems and what kind of advocacy areas we look at, and how we look to other stakeholders, already doing the work out there, and how can we support that and remove barriers to that. So, this isn't so much of a question as a kudos. You brought so much to not only the dimensions of like gardens and green space in our community, but just, that's like grown organically in all these other areas.
Well, thank you. And I mean, I tell this story elsewhere, but like, I think part of what you're saying, like engaging stakeholders. I mean, when I asked that question after having gardened for a year, my thought was like, surely I'm not the only one out here doing this. And asking that question is apparently maybe novel. Like that wasn't being asked a lot. And maybe this, I don't know if this is a West Texas thing. I don't know if I can't explain and maybe it's just a gardener thing. I don't know if it's a farmer thing. I think we could say that some farmers, I've observed some, independent streak. We could say that. So maybe there's something there, but everybody wants to create a new garden. I mean, like the excitement in the spring with building a new garden, like everybody's so excited about it. And I've just gotten to this place where I'm like, guys, love ya, love your passion, all about it. But you know what? There's a lot of gardens out here. And so that's why I don't say we're trying to create new gardens. We're creating new gardeners. We need more gardeners out there. And people aren't aware, and that's the other thing I've tried to bring awareness to, even in this first year, all the gardens that we do have, all the areas and the investment that has been made by both, nonprofit and our city, et cetera, into these resources. So quickly, I will plug the Booker T. Washington Community Garden, which is sponsored by the Roots Historic Arts Council. I want to say, I could be getting some of this wrong, so please forgive me. I want to say the Guadalupe Neighborhood Association sponsors, I know they sponsor currently. I'm not sure who originally got the grant. I want to say from Covenant to get that established. But those two neighborhoods have a ton of resources in those gardens. They actually, maybe they need some resources more, but generally they need gardeners. That would be amazing. And the Heart of Lubbock Community Garden obviously is doing very well, has been doing well for a long time. They recently have switched hands and ownership, and they're now with Texas Tech. But they too need gardeners. So, and these are all places that are in, low access to food, low access to veggies and fresh produce areas. So yeah, that's one of the pushes, is to really heighten that profile so people know where they are. And the Washington Garden, we have garden meetings monthly, and we have conversation about what would you like to plant? What would you like to grow? What can we do better? And one of the things that came out from our spring conversation was maybe it was our fall conversation. We want this place to be known as a place for food. So, that's exciting. And I think that, just about every garden wants that, but it's a level. So anyway, we struggle, we get there slowly but surely. Yeah. I'm going to pause. I'm going to let you ask more questions.
Yeah, no. It's great. I love, it's such a deep topic, and, kind of like one thing leads you sort of the next one. Why don't you tell us about, some of the activities that you have been doing or stakeholders have been doing in these different community garden spaces, or the school gardens, the food bank farm. Give people a snapshot of what the various things happening in the community.
Oh gosh. Okay. So I've talked about the three main community gardens. Obviously Food Bank Farm is another community garden / food for donation, all the things. And they have a CSA, the Food Bank Farm, and their CSA does support, it funds their students. They have a youth training program that they train high schoolers. Basically, it's called the GRUB program, Growing Recruits for Urban Business. So they help kids. Fair amount of their kids that are volunteering there in the summer have been assigned to be at the Food Bank Farm. So they're doing community service. And then those kids, if they apply if they volunteer for at least, I think it's 20 hours over the school year, they can apply for a paid internship. And that paid internship in the summer is, for some families, makes a huge difference. And the Food Bank Farm knows. They know who they're hiring, and they try and make sure they're picking people that they're going to help make a difference in that family. And anyway, I can talk about the Food Bank Farm like all day and all night, so I won't. But you can purchase a CSA. It is upfront. I believe it's $350 off the top of my head. And that works out for about 22 weeks of produce. It works out to about $17, $18 a week. I call it the veggie treadmill because you get like a bag of produce and it gets more and more through the summer and the next bag is coming. And you just got to like Lucy on the line with, I'm totally aging myself, but she's eating the chocolates and trying to fix it anyway. So yeah, that's the veggie treadmill. But if you don't make it a week, then that produce goes to the food bank. It gets put in boxes. So it's also not pressure, I tell myself too. So that is the food bank farm. Super awesome. School gardens. Many school gardens were hit pretty hard this year without access to those school gardens from the community. It has been difficult to support them, but there are some still active. And many schools have gardens, I would say, and they just haven't been planted up this year. I think we have a Google map, which I can reshare on something if you have some kind of links that follow this. Yeah, okay. That shows all the different school and community gardens. And if anybody wants to get in touch with somebody at a certain place, please reach out to me and let me know, because I have contact information for just about every single one of these places. And that's also something that before I worked with the coalition, I don't think, you know what I mean? Like nobody was kind of housing that information. How do I get in touch with XYZ? If they don't have a Facebook page or they don't have a whatever. And some places are more organized and they have those things, but some don't. And so schools are a particularly difficult situation, I would say. Every school is going to be different. Every school is going to have a different scenario. So Brosco Wilson Elementary has a wonderful school garden, one of the oldest ones, I think, in the city, and it is primarily parent run. But then you're going to have some schools where that is not really a great option, or it just doesn't make sense. Like it wouldn't make a lot of sense to have. So Estacado High School has a garden. They have beautiful raised beds. They have grown some amazing stuff in there, but it's a high school, right? Like that wouldn't make a lot of sense if that was parent run. So their culinary class has been the class that has like adopted that garden. And so that they haven't been super active this year, but that is something that's happened in the past. And I think that's a wonderful partnership in a way for that garden to have some real love. And then there's some schools that have partner organizations that really sponsor them. And so maybe a church or something like that. I know that Bean Elementary has had huge support. They have raised beds, they have irrigation, all kinds of stuff. And this year it's just been difficult because people from outside community aren't getting on campuses. So that's been a challenge. Josh, what did I miss? So we talked about community schools, food bank farm.
Yeah, no, that's a really good picture of the landscape, and maybe like Nick would speak to this as well, or these kind of spaces are really important community assets to have, right? And they have all kinds of different characterizations and natures and who takes care of them. But what do spaces like this, mean to the communities that they're embedded in? What's their value? What are they? To give us some perspective for how you feel about that. Maybe Nick and then Jessica.
Yeah, I can't speak enough about the value of green space when it comes to living inside of a city, right? And both because of the preferences of younger generations as well as for boomer generations that are now kind of getting to the point where they're looking for their final house, they're empty nesting, they're wanting to kind of scale down, things like that. The desires of those groups put a huge emphasis on quality of life. And in fact, when you look at cities that are thriving or cities that are growing, very well, and there's great opportunities there, things like that, you find that there's a strong relationship between access to green space, and quality of life, and those things oftentimes go hand in hand. For me, one of the biggest concerns is when I look at how some of the neighborhoods that are being developed today in the southern parts of the city and the lack of green space that some of those have, and the impact that that actually has. I think, Josh, you might have shared this with me a while back, but the impact that it has on the heat map of the city of Lubbock, and where the hottest areas of the city are directly correlates with lack of green space, right? And you can see that whole trend. And so to me, it's modern cities need this. We need it for our quality of life. We need it for health reasons. We need it for preserving property values and the quality of neighborhoods. So it just, to me, it's everything. It really comes to everything.
Yeah, and Jessica, as you take that, maybe you can also speak to like how you've worked to connect communities into the garden and the garden with the communities, and these other stakeholders that you brought in, maybe like resource sharing or marketing or collecting up people's waste even to be put to use in the garden.
Yes. So we're very active right now. The Booker T. Washington Garden, I'm just going to give an example, has been doing amazing work. And that, again, is based with leadership from Lubbock Historical Arts Council. I am really sorry about the ding notification. I'm trying to silence all the conversations and it's not happening. But anyway, so Booker T. Washington. So we are trying really hard to connect organizations and communities in that neighborhood. So one of the things that we have done is we've been able to have a pop-up farmers market. And it started out at the end, I was working on creating like a meal kit to share. And I actually, in order to distribute said meal kit, I didn't know if I needed a cold storage license. And so Juicy Lucy, who has a cold storage license, also has a farmer's pantry, brings in a bunch of stuff from a bunch of different growers, and also meat and eggs and all kinds of things. And so I basically said, would you show up and help me while I, sharing these things? We're going to keep the meat frozen. And hopefully, I'm going to buy produce from her to guarantee her that income. And then hopefully she gets other sales too. And what has ended up happening is she's now come 3 times. And this last time was definitely our most populous, whatever one. We had at least 50 people there. We also, the Historic Arts Council hired live music, had live music there. We have lawn games. We've been advertising at the local churches. Again, in an effort to say, this is your neighborhood. This is a garden you can come in. I, of course, am the creepy person always saying, come, I want to show you what we have growing. And I'm going to harvest it for you right here. And you're going to take it with you. So, because that's what gives me my jollies. So anyway, and hopefully we're kind of slowly but surely building up that connection in the community, building up that comfort with coming into that garden. I mean, I think a lot of people, I think maybe this was the culture for this garden maybe a couple of years ago, that if you didn't plant it, then you couldn't harvest it. And that's this current garden team, the Lubbock Historic Arts Council, that's not the culture they want to promote. They're trying to say, it is here. It's here for the community. We want to give it to you. Please, we don't care if you come and help. That's cool too. You can also just hang out. You could just chat with me while I harvest it. That's fine. So anyway, we're working on all of those connections. None of this operates in a vacuum. And I mean, the more connections we have, the more likely that this continues. The garden, the churches, all of it. So that's part of it. And go ahead.
Any comments, Adam, on people who want to be stingy with the carrots? You didn't plant it, you can't eat it.
Yeah, I don't know about that at all as far as what was going on at the Booker T before now, but yeah, I don't know. That sounds strange, but hey. So Jessica, what's one of the I guess what are some of the challenges you're seeing as far as, I know you were saying, and this is something that I think me and Josh have spoke about from the early days of Garden City, is how hard it is to find gardeners. So what are some challenges you think that we're facing in that area? What are some things we've tried? Um, is there anything we haven't tried?
I want to make sure, how hard is it to find
Gardeners. Yeah,
gardeners?
gardeners. Yeah.
Gardeners.
People
Okay.
to help out. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So, I mean, there's been a resurgence of interest in growing your own food, obviously, in the last year. That's, I mean, it's an obvious. And then the question is, what kind of people want to come do a community garden? So I mean, that's not the same population. So I can garden in my backyard all day long, and I have a great time. But what I get something out of personally is actually being in community with people and interacting with those people and learning about their lives. And yes, I'm now at a point where I actually get a lot out of teaching them too. Like, hey, did you know you could eat beet greens? I'm that annoying, nerdy person who's, also educating about things as we do. And I'll definitely ask, is this okay if I make a suggestion sometimes before I encourage someone? Because that may not have been how they planted a tomato, when maybe their dad or their uncle taught them XYZ. I want to hear that too, because I don't know everything for sure. So anyway, I think it's a different kind of person that wants to be in a community garden. But I also would hope that I could find value for people who may not realize that they could get what they want out of being in a community garden. And I don't think that everybody realizes, you know what I mean? Like the interactions that could happen, the education that could happen. Some people, like we had somebody come by the pop-up market and ask, he was like, oh, can I rent a bed? And we were like, yes, please. How do we? So, because there are places in this country where, there's community gardens out there where you pay up front or something, and it's your bed and you choose what to plant in it. We would love to see that model somewhere. That is something I have talked about with Roots. They are open to that suggestion. We have yet to have someone like commit to doing that. So that's another, I would hope, opportunity for a gardener is somebody who does want to do that, but maybe they don't want to have to build it in their own backyard. I'm hoping that we could create that model, whether that's at Booker T or at Guadalupe, where someone rents a bed and then the water, that rent pays for part of the water. It's going to pay for weed eating around the beds. I mean, there's inherent value into doing that model versus doing it in your backyard. If you rent and all you have, and you don't want to build anything, or you don't want to buy pots or something like that, it could be an idea. So, but finding the people that are interested in that, we are not there yet. We're close. I hope. So
it's so true. It's like hitting really kind of every level, because in order for people to like have community, they have to have a space to have community in. And this is like really important for that. And gardening and growing plants and doing this kind of a thing is a topic that people, sometimes they just like jump headfirst into and like make a lot of mistakes. And that's a great way to enter this kind of a thing. But also people have a lot of anxiety about it, a little bit of nervousness about jumping into it. So this is a great place to sort of like learn and kind of get some experience with people that have been doing it and kind of get ahead. It in a lot of ways, it's a space that's been under some control in a way, and so you can kind of trust what's growing in the soil out there. So these spaces are really hitting on all these levels, and really addressing food access and addressing protecting common green spaces that we're all going to need more and more and more as our future unfolds, as Lubbock hopefully gets a little more dense as these kind of things happen. It's really just a neat topic that I really I wish we had like 3 hours. Jessica, as you well know, what we do is often quite wonky and policy related. What are the pieces of policy that we could be doing as a city to promote this kind of space, to even if it's not in a school or community garden, like what are other things as far as policy pieces that the city needs or could improve upon that would allow for more of this activity?
Thank you. So one of the things I want to bring attention to was thanks to Josh's help, we've been able to make some progress with the Universal, what's it, UDC? Development Code, Universal Development Code.
Unified Development Code, yes. Yeah.
Unified. See, I knew I was wrong. Okay, Unified, thank you. So you brought to our attention, the Hunger and Horticulture team, the action team with the coalition, that there was some pieces in there about originally there was something about a buffer zone. There was something about like mixed use. We had to have, can we have allowances for a greenhouse and a tool shed? These are really standard things that a garden should have. Like a big community garden where you have resources. I mean, you need a place to store the tools. A greenhouse is something that everybody wants. It's so hard to have in Lubbock because they just want to blow away. But we've so far so good at the Rickshee Washington Garden. We've had one for almost 4 or 5 months now, so fingers crossed. It's just normal. These are normal things. And I was shocked that the request or the Unified Development Code was going to include a requirement for, what was it, something like 15 feet of buffer? Was it 20?
Yeah, the
you don't need to go on now.
You know, what they wanted was some buffering that would kind of separate and delineate community garden spaces from the rest of their spaces, so as to kind of not be a nuisance. But the requirements for it between the fencing and the landscaping and the space allotments were excessively onerous, you know, and prohibitive to this kind of space flourishing. And so, yeah, we got in there, made a comment about it. The city seemed really eager to resolve it. The planning department pretty rapidly set up a meeting to get some resolution to this. And we have seen it improve from where it was. There's a few more cycles to this before it's all said and done. We're going to keep our eye on it. But yeah, having the right type of code that allows for these types of spaces is definitely one of them for sure.
Well, and all the spaces that exist now would be grandfathered in. That wasn't, you know, that they were very quick to make sure we knew that, which was wonderful. That being said, so like Guadalupe Garden, for example, doesn't currently have a greenhouse. Well, if they were to decide to add that greenhouse, then all of a sudden they would be subject to all of the code that they were now saying and by the way, on top of that greenhouse, you're going to have to buy a whole bunch of trees and you're going to have, you know, I mean, that's for people, I'm telling you, the resources that go into creating a garden, it's already cost prohibitive, especially if you want that garden to be low maintenance and last a long time where you don't have to redo things and rebuild. That's an investment. And people have made that investment in some of the areas of our city, and we need to protect that investment. But if you then add on a whole other set of things, I mean, you're going to choke it. There's not going to be no more. So, I mean, I'm grateful that we have allies, have this ability to, because honestly, like you said, paying attention, you've been paying attention for the past year. That's about right. It feels like, you know, I would have never known to look in the Unified Development Code for something like this. It's just not my area. Give me a statistical analysis, but I'm not looking at a development code. So anyway, yeah, that was a huge piece. And then, so to move us to other policy things, there's areas, so 2 things I would like to touch on. One is that any kind of edible landscaping, I've had I've actually had master gardeners, say that was something we need to advocate more for when we put in trees in our green spaces, or if we're putting in bushes or whatever else in our city parks. Why aren't we doing more edible landscaping? And I'll tell you, I've had this conversation with, look, for example, one grounds crew, I won't name names. Had a peach tree donated, and they said, no, that's just too much mess. And so perhaps that is an argument that I could see someone making against an edible landscape. And to that, I would say, what about the acorns and the pine cones? Because that's still there.
And the cherry
So
blossoms.
what was that?
The cherry blossoms.
And the cherry blossoms. And I mean, in plenty of places have these edible landscape trees. Plenty of other cities have orange trees that line the streets. There's no reason why we couldn't also have peach trees and pecan trees, and then make sure we're telling people there's peaches and pecans, edible landscaping, herbs. I mean, there's herbal bushes that we could be doing with rosemary and sage and just great things that we could be utilizing, and they're beautiful and also functional. So, and that doesn't, I'm not saying that, people are going to live off of peaches and pecans and sage, but it's an effort to have a larger vision. So
Definitely. And we are at 8 o'clock. So
oh gosh.
yeah, I hate to cut us off here, but yeah, like Josh said, we could stay here for 3 hours. So thank you everybody who has tuned into the show. Thank you, Jessica, for joining us. Thank you, Josh. Thank both of you for everything that you guys do. This is really important work, and I think this just further illustrates. I've been having this conversation a lot lately. I actually like it, but this just further illustrates the importance of getting involved in these things and civic engagement, even with the frustrations that we have. You're not going to win every fight. You're not going to get everything that you need or want. But when you have a group paying attention like Lubbock Compact, and that's kind of the space that we seek to fill, right? We want to be somebody that's watching so that we can notify the right people who can get involved in this, because Nick and I are involved in UDC as well. We're involved in charter review. We're involved in different things. We can't do it all, me and Nick. And so that's where Josh and Jessica and these people can do Garden City things, because there's so much there. And so again, anybody out there that's listening that may be interested or may think that you can contribute in some way to the mission of the compact, which is really just making our communities better, increasing the quality of life in our communities. So if you have ideas or things that you can do, don't ever hesitate to reach out and go to lubbockcompact.com/volunteer. We will always be happy to help you or happy to have you on the team. And also don't forget that you can donate to Lubbock Compact if you so choose. That's at lubbockcompact.com/donate. Follow us on Facebook. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel if you'd like to help us out for free. Give us a like and a comment. And thanks, everybody. Good night.